What's up, my brothers and sisters? Welcome to the Fireground Fitness Podcast, where we talk about all things pertaining to life on and off the fireground. Today, we are celebrating the 100th episode of the podcast. And in doing so, I brought 4 former guests, friends of mine. And if you want to know what episode they are, they're in the show notes. But it's Chris Stewart, Reda, Riddle, Burnett, and Pearce. All amazing folks. We sit down and talk about previous guests that have been on and things that they've said. We talk about the relevance of those comments. Do they still apply today? And how we're feeling about them at this point. So it's a fantastic episode. Kind of goes longer than normal. So buckle up. Please enjoy. And let's take it from there. Folks, introduce yourselves.
My name is Reda Riddle Bigler. I'm a deputy chief for Phoenix Fire, 23 years, currently in HR.
My name's Chris Stewart. I'm a founding member of the Angry Scotsman Firefighter Affinity Group, and I'm just happy to be here.
My name is Burnett. I'm a captain with the city of Buckeye. I've been there 20 years.
Pearce, captain with the city of Phoenix, currently at North Deputy.
I have had such opportunities to talk at tailboards and at kitchen tables with these folks, and they have, with their intellect, illuminated my life and edified me. And they don't believe that's to be true, but it's true. Each one of you have. And what I want to do is reflect on some things that have happened in the last 99 episodes and maybe a quote or two, some quotes and some ideas and thoughts, and talk about the relevance of those thoughts. And are we still, are they relevant today? Is it meet our operational context today? And just talk about it. And if it doesn't, what can we do differently? And so Reda pulled up this first quote, and
It's an icon in the fire service, Dennis Compton.
You know, you remember the old statement is that so-and-so forgot where they came from?
mm-hmm.
You've heard that before, right?
Oh, for sure.
That's half of a statement. Just don't forget where you came from. But don't pretend to understand where you've never been. As if you're an expert on it.
Share us your thoughts on that one.
So I think about my current role in HR, and it makes me think of, we use don't forget where you came from all the time. And as I get to stand before, recruits that are just hired and going to go into the next academy, you think of like how new and how moldable this group of people are. And then I think about the position that I sit in, and we talk about don't act as though you're an expert on it, where the only way that I can be good at my job is to listen to people and go back to like the foundational skills of listening and being coachable and trainable.
Crispy, I saw you shaking your head.
So with me, I kind of, with this quote specifically, and I was thinking about it this morning, a quick little story. So I remember working as a captain, just roving through, not my normal spot, not anywhere that I'd normally be at. And I'm there and I'm talking to this crew. They're like, yeah, we got this new probationary guy and he just doesn't get it. And he goes, and he should because he came up, his dad was in the fire service and he should get it. He goes, but he didn't come in as a 17, 18-year-old kid into the fire service. He came in and went and had a life and did other things and then found the fire service after a military career. And so he grew up with the expectations of a different organization, a different set of experiences. And those guys, so he would go and do the dishes and things like that and worked hard, all the things that you would expect. But the little games, the little things that guys do around the station of like, hey man, if I come up and I yank the mop out of his hand, like he just let me take it and then he'd go find other work. And they didn't understand why he didn't understand our culture. And so I looked at it.
No matter how stupid it is.
No matter how stupid it is. And I just looked at that and I thought about it for a second. I go, did anyone tell him? Did anyone explain this to him, that this is the expectation? And so I literally go and he'd been there for a month. And I go and I have a little talk with him of, hey man, this is the game. This is what the expectation is here. And he goes, oh, he goes, that's not my life experience. That's not the experiences that I've had in the military of someone, if your superior came and said, stop doing this, go do that, that's what you did. And so the expectation to fight to continue to do little things. And I know that seems like a very small transactional thing, of game in a station, but I think it goes to the larger piece of that quote is that if you don't give your expectations, if you don't talk to people and have that back and forth of their experience to your experience, that you're not going to get the end goal result that you want if the people don't understand that they're playing two different games and you don't even know. So that's just kind of what that instantly reminded me of that experience.
I am going to go with a Brene Brown quote, which is clear as kind, right? You want people to follow a certain direction, you got to tell them, because you don't know what their context is. You don't know where they're coming from, right? But Stu, I saw you, or you made a comment. What were you thinking about that culture?
Oh, and I have no clue if this relates to what Dennis's quote that Reda's pointing out, but we have this really horrible habit of having a goofy culture inside of our departments, inside of our organizations, inside our firehouses, and we expect people to magically understand what that is prior to them showing up, and then we don't. And then we get angry if they don't engage in the same silliness that we think is funny or we think is interesting, or it's just kind of the way we do things, and then we get mad at them for not doing that or knowing and understanding, but that becomes pervasive. So that goes way beyond probationary firefighters. So when those folks promote up through the organization, and they are actually charged with making decisions. They're charged with solving organizational problems. They're charged with creating vision. Then those same exact people have a really difficult time communicating problems, developing understanding, and helping the organization figure out where and how that they need to move so that we actually do a better job, that we are more safe, we're more effective, we're meeting the expectations of the community or the customers or whoever we're talking about. So we play those stupid games in firehouses, and then we think when we promote, those stupid games are going to work in other places at other organizational levels, and then they can't figure out why the city doesn't understand why we behave that way, and then hell, city HR can't figure out why we behave that way and treat people that way. And we sit around acting like, God, I can't believe everybody doesn't understand and do what it is that we think is important or we thought was cool or was our culture. So it happens in the small places. It expands forever. It has expanded up into the organization as people have advanced, and yet we don't recognize it and fix it and manage it and create a better system for it. So. Being around new firefighters, they're actually way more adept than any of us in this room were when we came into the fire service. And they're doing a way better job. They're asking way better questions. They're smarter. They're more educated. They're more willing to learn, I think, than we were. And we need to actually play into that. We need to figure out how to make that better. And it actually has everything to do with us because we're the problem. But we have to fix us. We don't have to fix them.
Yeah, I think to Chief's point, when we hear that, for me, when I hear that phrase, the first part of that phrase usually gets leveraged to tether our people to the expectations people have around them. So we say, we hear things like, you've changed. Well, good. Remember where you came from. Well, I do remember where I came from, and where I came from, we had some problems that we need to fix. And so there's this dichotomy that we use it to hold people back. And yet what I love about that quote from Chief is that the posture of the second part is this humble posture. Like, you're right. I didn't forget where I came from, but my role in the organization is that it's changed, and I'm not an expert on it, but I don't have all the answers. but we have to work through these situations to get these dumb games to play, to grow a culture, to meet our new people. I've seen a bunch of recruits in the past 6 months come through, and your point is exactly right, Chief Stewart, is like they are asking really good questions and they want real answers. They don't want, when I talk about my first few years on the job, it's different for them. It was a whole different culture. And so the questions they ask is like, okay, I remember where I came from, but I'm in a position now where I'm like, okay, I got to figure out how to lead you and how to get you the information that you're looking for so that when you get out there, you're productive and you're efficient and you are steering the culture of our organizations, which is ours it's new. They're just a lot of new people. And I think that's really good. So I love the dichotomy of the humbleness of the second part of the quote, especially right now. I'm in a brand new position and I'm like, never been here before. What do I do? And it's like, okay, we'll start asking questions, start listening. And that just really speaks to me. I love that quote.
So the second part of that quote that Dennis talks about, that is the warning to leaders. And because right now there is a pervasive, and I'm going to say across the National Fire Service, because you can read articles and problems and lawsuits and all this, and realize that it is the situation, or it's a pervasive issue, is that leaders or people get into leadership positions. They're not sure what they should be doing. They're certainly not an expert, but they're either going to bullshit or gaslight their way through being in that position. And they don't know and understand what it is that they should be doing. They can't connect back to the people that they're laying this expectation out for, the firefighters, right? The people in the organization that actually do the work. And so they act as if they are experts on things that they have no idea about. And they, whether it's purposeful or not, they completely and totally gaslight the organization and the members and the community in a lot of situations, and have zero recognition that it is completely and totally undermining them the entire time. The false platitudes, the complete nonsense that comes out of their mouth, rather than, hey, this is the issue, these are the circumstances, and this is why this is actually an issue, and here is the vision or direction or the process that we need to embark in to actually fix this. And so, Dennis is people might not understand just how big of a warning that is to the current and future leadership of the fire service.
First of all, can we just talk about how deep you guys went right away? Thanks, Reda. Holy crap, it got heavy in here, heart fast. So let me ask you this.
You should hear what happens in my head. You think that's a lot. There's a freaking
that is a dark, scary
wheel
place I
in
would
my
never
head.
want to be. When I think about this idea, when people talk about it seems very self-serving. Don't forget where you came from, as in, it's like any of us would forget what that's like to be in a firehouse, to run calls, whatever. And, we talk about getting promoted, having new responsibilities. And everyone's like, Captain 180, that guy completely changed, Well, they changed, and you said good. Yeah, they changed for the right reason, because they're leveling up. They're growing in the organization, in their own personal maturity, so that they can take on new challenges to try to help the organization. And people need to accept and grow with that, and be willing to take that next step. And if you're not, maybe you're not in the right position. If you're like, no, I'm going to be a chief that relates to the boys, and we're going to hang out in the firehouse and, drink coffee and eat donuts and tell stories at the kitchen table, well, then I don't think you're doing your position and function appropriately within the organization. That is not your job. Your job is to take care of those folks in the firehouse, to remember where you came from, so that you can make their work experience healthier, more robust, more effective in the community, not just let the games play. And I think that's when we talk about, when Crispy brought up this idea of, when I was in the Marine Corps, we'd call them fuck games. It's really all they are, is just we are going to manipulate our folks and play with them and tease them and give them a hard time. Is there an end there that is achievable? Well, I think you could argue at some point that to a degree you're bringing people and indoctrinating them into the culture, et cetera, of this family, this unit. Are people willing to tolerate these silly games? Can I trust this person? Right? There's some dynamics there. However, the fire service is maturing all the way across the board, and if we are using manipulative tactics to enculturate people, we're probably not doing the right thing anymore, right? In today's day and age, we have to be better about the way we indoctrinate people, and that indoctrination is more about teaching and developing and growing people in a healthy way and identifying what they bring to our culture as a value add to our organizations. Now, I'm going to say a really scary word, and we might touch on this in a quote later, but we talk about DEI, and everyone goes, "Ugh, DEI." But the reality is, we're already diverse. So how do we create an organization where we're tapping into the powers that everybody brings, right? Everybody brings their own things, and that's inclusion. And how do we bring these people in and let them work in this environment? So, but playing games where we wrestle away the mop, like, seriously, is that how we want to develop people? Is that the tool we're using?
We hear often when we get new firefighters the spoken and unspoken expectations of a firehouse, right? And so something that I reminded our guys of is that, those unspoken expectations are just premeditated resentment. And so we build this into our culture. Well, they should know. No, they shouldn't. Like, if you didn't explain to them that this is part of it, then that's not on them, that's on us. And so you bring recruits or new firefighters or new captains or whoever it is, and we don't clearly articulate why the culture is set up this way, then we all of a sudden that person's not a good booter or that person's not a good firefighter. And it's like, we never taught them. That quote, the Chief Bernasini clip that went viral, it went viral again a few months ago about the chainsaw whisper, like it's not their responsibility, but it's such a clear thing. It's like, okay, so what? So what? Like, it's like, it's our responsibility to set those expectations. And you see that resentment. Oh, they didn't do it the way I did it. They forgot. It's like, no, the culture is shifting. We're changing. We're becoming more professional. Tell them what you want.
So I have one more thing to add that was just talking about this past week and said, if you think about the age of the people that we're hiring, it's probably not uncommon that we have a workforce that is 25 years and under. And so think about how many jobs they've had, what experience they come with, which probably isn't very much. So if they work here for 20 years and nobody in the organization invests in these people, I mean, they are molded who they're around, whether it's good, whether it's bad. And so I was talking to a group of captains and I said, you need to think of these people as your own kids. You invest in your kids. You try to keep them on the right track. You have honest conversations. You are looking out for them. So that's kind of as you're talking about the unwritten rules, I think the book of unwritten rules is bigger than the book of rules. So that's important to share.
So it's not all positive, I don't think, because if we just say that statement, don't make sure that you remember where you came from. I am going to guess, and this is just a guess, that everybody in this room, a face or a picture comes to mind of somebody who actually did. That you can point to right now and go, yeah, they lost touch with reality, or they lost touch with whatever it is that they're doing. So that's real. Mm-hmm. It happens. And so it's yes, we do need to change, but we need to change in the right way. We need to change in a positive, progressive way. Just changing to change or changing just to forget. It doesn't work.
Right. So you brought up a really good point, but I want to segue to one of my favorite quotes, which is from Kelvin Barty. And so let me share this quote with you.
Few organizations in the world that hires people for what we call life. We hire people for, we expect them to be around for 25 or 30 years from the day they walk in the door. And we expect that growth. It doesn't mean you're going to promote through a process, but you're going to have growth and maturity through a process because you're going to have different experiences. You're going to have different leadership experiences, different mentorship experiences, and you're going to have different opportunities to lead and mentor back as well. But when you're thinking about, again, in life, 30 some odd years, there's a lot of things that happen and a lot of things that change, a lot of changes that happen over that period of time. And hopefully most of those are for the positive. But organizationally, we have to allow for that. We have to allow for people who have, come in as one thing, have one set of values, or have practiced a certain set of behaviors, or have performed at a certain level, to evolve to either, to evolve through their performance and behavior and aptitude throughout their whole entire career.
So this idea, we talk about these long careers that we bring people on for, and then when somebody makes an error or does something big, small, or otherwise, and we completely eviscerate them and then mark them for life, and for the rest of their career, they're a waste. And how destructive is that to the individuals? And it sends a message throughout the organization that, you can't make mistakes or you're going to get filleted. So people pull back because we know that when you're doing something that's really interesting or transformative, it might be messy and you might make an error and you could fail, right? But if organizationally it's not psychologically safe to do that, because you'll get marked for life and eviscerated. And I'll just say this: I went through a process where I demoted from engineer back to firefighter so I could go to TRT. And I had to push back against the organization and advocate for myself to make this happen. And I was told repeatedly that I ruined my career by people of influence in the organization. And I began to feel very unsettled and unsafe. And finally I had to say, I don't even give a fuck. I don't care anymore. And by that I mean I care about the work I'm doing, etc. But I didn't care about what these people were saying, because I am going to push forward anymore. I had to say, what you're saying to me is not going to define how I move forward here, and push into that, because I am going to change and transform myself, whether you like it or not. Here we go. So I'm curious, how you guys feel about that quote. Is that something that is real for us? Do we still, and the landscape is changing. People are leaving earlier. Are we still hiring people for life?
Man, that's a long question, because when I came on, the idea was the model in my head was the 37-year salty veteran firefighter who was experienced and had all the answers and had the steady hand, and you had that time and you earned your tenure. And then I get 15 years in and I'm like, 37 years, man. I want to, wow, I don't want to go that far. Or maybe I do, or maybe I don't. And what we're hearing and what we're seeing is we're seeing people going, man, I love this job, but I want to do other things as well. And so they're financially way smarter than we were when I started, and they're setting themselves up to punch out at 20. We've seen multiple firefighters leave at 5, 7, 8 years. They come in, they do the job, and they realize, man, the exposures, this wasn't in the brochure. I stole that from somebody, I don't know where, but this isn't the job I signed up for, or this job I'm stuck on a rescue on an AMBO. We've heard that a lot. I don't want to do that job. I want to be on the fire truck, or I thought the job was about this. So the paradigm changes, and we have to be honest to them. This doesn't have to be everything if you don't want it to be. It can be a shorter, and the retirement system's changed. I mean, all of our young firefighters, they've got to do 25 years. I mean, that's a significant chunk when they've probably never known someone who's had the same career for that long. I mean, certainly people I went to high school with, I graduated in 2000. Of my friends that didn't go in the fire service, most of them had at least 2 career changes, if not 5 to 10 job changes. And I've been in the same place, and it's unheard of. You still in Buckeye? I'm like, yeah, and I got to do another 12, 13 years there. I got little kids, So it's a much different shape, and it's interesting to see.
So I think if you look at it from the highest level strategic position that you can, and you look at the cyclical nature of organizations and how they manage people and how they train people and what they tolerate, what they don't tolerate, all that. So I would say that there was probably a period before I came on the Phoenix Fire Department where we didn't tolerate mistakes, or they didn't tolerate mistakes, right? They didn't tolerate a lot of people. They didn't want anybody that didn't look like them, quite honestly.
When you say didn't tolerate, do you mean organizationally it was a discipline? Or
yeah. So if you didn't fit the mold and you didn't fit the job performance, you're done. You're out of there, right? And then so I think what I saw in my period, especially with the first fire chief that I worked for, is there was a ton of second chance management, and like to the point where it made a lot of people uncomfortable because we were giving a lot of second chances, and I'm super supportive of it. I have zero issue or trepidation with it. And then, but then I saw when he left, and then I saw, and because I had been a captain for 7 years when Burnett retired, and then I sat in the captain's meetings with the next fire chief, and people. And other captains, and I picture their faces right now. They're finally, there's going to be accountability around this place, and you're like, really? Okay. And so then they have this idea of we're gonna tighten things up, and we're not tolerate the mistakes, and we're not going to tolerate people doing their job, not meeting the standards of whatever they thought that was the job. And then it actually got worse, and it played, and there's societal connections to it. But in the last 5 years of my career, there was very much, I don't ever remember a period of time like I'll say the last 5 years of my career in the city of Phoenix, where there were more people off on administrative leave for disciplinary issues, on the job, off the job, all of that. And we had gone to this position of very much, we're not going to tolerate, people making mistakes and doing dumb shit on their personal lives and all this other stuff. And we're going to clamp down. And I also will say that our morale was never higher when we had fantastic second chance management. And I will say that in my career, my personal experience, our morale was never lower when we were intolerant of mistakes. We were intolerant of people that didn't fit whatever mold. And there's a direct correlation and a connection, I believe, between effective training, internal customer service, and managing discipline, if you will, or accountability. Maybe that's a better word. So it's if you look at it in cyclical, and it will come back. There will be a time period, obviously, I don't know when, could be 5 years, could be 10 years, but it will come back, and it will probably continue forever as a cyclical process. And I think society does that. I think organizations do that. And but the only people that can, again, maybe there's a theme here, the only people that are actually really in control of it is the leaders of the organization, and what and how, and the standards that they set, the way they manage accountability, and how they hold, and it will always start with how they hold themselves accountable. Always, always, always will start with how they hold themselves accountable. So when we get back to high personal accountability for leaders of an organization, we will probably see a high level of accountability, and then an improved tolerance for diverse ideas and thoughts and people and all that other stuff. So I don't know. It's an interesting cycle to pay attention to.
Yeah. What comes to my mind is this idea that if you teach the principles, the behavior will follow. And I say that because organizationally, there's discipline is about people making the right, staying inside their own integrity and following the organization's values. But if they don't feel like the organization has integrity and is sticking to the values, then why would I as an individual? And so there's dissonance in that. And you're going to stand up and tell me you must do, but then I don't see the organization taking strides to make that so. And that's where that dissonance comes from. And anyways, I don't want to dominate. Go ahead. Do you have a thought?
Well, that's where they tie right back to you forgot where you came from, right? You forgot. Oh, now it's not okay to do this and you go, yeah, you're right. And I was wrong then for doing that. And then there's that open, transparent, but there's also hey, like, it's okay to make a mistake. Like, you're going to make mistakes. You are going to mess things up. I messed up the very first plug I ever took on a working fire. I totally botched it, right? Yeah, yeah, it was a long time ago. But I felt this big, and I was like, and it's like, and I remember there was someone there who was just like, hey, mistakes happen. You're new. That was your first time. It's okay, man. We got you. Like, we'll fix what happened there. We're going to get you back to the standard
So you threw a caveat in there.
Yes.
You said, it's okay. You're new. Is it okay to make mistakes when you have some tenure?
Absolutely. So I was thinking about standards. If I were to go to a kitchen table in the firehouse, any firehouse across the valley, and I would say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to lower the recruitment standards. We're going to lower the academy standards to include for X reason. Doesn't matter what the reason is. Insert whatever you want. Every fire station across the state would be like, that's wrong. You can't lower the standard. So if I flipped it on its head and said, well, we're going to lower the standard because you have X number of years, it's the same principle. The standard's still the same. The question becomes is if they don't meet the standards, what are we doing for those in our organization to bring them back to that? It's not this, we make a mistake and it's just okay. It's, hey, we identified an area where we failed you and you have some ownership in that as well. But now we're going to say, hey, this is how we're getting back to those values. And when leaders are open about their own mistakes, they're vulnerable about the things that they did wrong or how they improved, I think the troops follow. When you're like, hey, you messed that up. I've messed that up before too. Let's talk about how we do it better next time. For these big reasons, like it's part of our value system. It's part of our protocol, whatever it is, from the task to the strategic level, from leadership to fireground operations. It's just a mindset that says you are valued, even when you bump up against those navigational buoys. Like, hey, we'll help you, and we'll be honest about it.
And I think Stu talked about second chance management. And what I think about with that is, as a leader, my responsibility is I have ownership in this organization. And if one of my members, one of my teammates essentially, does something egregious, whatever that is, my question is what didn't I do to set an expectation, to train, to teach, to help that person go down the right path? Right. And it depends on, there's all kinds of variables here. What are we talking about here? Right. Talking about someone who goes out and gets DUIs or someone who makes a mistake on the fire ground. Like there's just a variety of things here. But organizationally, if we're going to have people who are going to work for us, work in our organizations alongside us for 25 or more years, they're going to make some mistakes. There's going to be some bumps in the road. And so this idea that we have to lean in and help people be successful in that is so important. And sets the tempo for the organization, for people to feel connected in the organization and to feel, we talk about, the brotherhood and sisterhood and family. Well, family is for life. And you don't extricate people from your life just because they make an error, right?
Some people don't.
Should we?
No. And again, so for me, I've got kind of a kind of a different experience over the last handful of years in my position, in that I've had, I work and I drive for shift commanders, and I've had 2 shift commanders who have now retired or left the job for other things, and both of them are on that top end of that spectrum, right? That Corny, Santa Cruz, who I drove for, left at just short of 40 years on the job, and then I drove for Paul, who's somewhere around 35, 37 years on the job, and I currently am driving, the chief I'm driving for has got 30 plus years on the job. So I've had a really good experience with some individuals who have been around the organization, at a time frame that I couldn't even imagine, that I'm looking at leaving sometime around the 30 to 32 year mark, and they're going to blow right past that into that top end kind of number. And the thing that I saw from every one of these individuals that allowed them to make it that far is they still had a love for the organization, for the mission, and then that buy-in for what we're doing on the day-to-day, like the ground level of it. They still had that care of what's happening, and a part of it is because you're in that position, but you're also still working in a firehouse, and so you get to see probationary guys come through there and have the excitement of the youth of the organization, which I think helps all of us. And we talk about just how much smarter they are, their ability to recognize the advantages of the organizations and the value, something that I haven't taken full advantage of in my time frame on the job with the educational piece. There's more and more people, the youth of this, that immediately come in and continue their degrees, not just start their educational system, but continue to go further. And I think that's what allows them to take opportunities to move outside and do better things for themselves and for their families. And so whether you split and you're able to take that path, or you educate yourself and you continue to go through there, I think that you take that pool of and it comes back to the good things that we are doing. I think that's a regional thing that we're doing really well. And so that tie-in of the people, again, everyone that's in this room now, right, that has been around there, they still have that connection, that love for the mission of it, that what we're trying to do, and that desire to leave everything that we're doing better than we found it, and identify the things that the mistakes, the growth that happened within, especially my organization, right, that even in the 24, 25 years that I have on the job, the size of the city and the mission and what we're trying to wrap our hands around now and get around versus, what it was then. And as you guys in your organizations are starting to, you're on the front end of that, and you can see the things that we've done, and maybe the things that we've stumbled with, whether it's through problems in budgets and things like that over the years that presented challenges. But it's nice to have that perspective of, hey, these are the things that happened there, and we can make that better. I kind of can't. I went all over there. I kind of shotgunned that answer a little bit, but I felt like we touched on a lot of different things in there. I just wanted to kind of bring it back around to that. I think that there's still a lot of good stuff out there.
Yeah, it's okay to love the job. It's okay to love the people, the homies that I want to be down with.
Yeah.
They love the job. Yeah. They may have different seats in the organization, but they love the job. There's a movement. I've seen it. It's all over social media. You watch. I've interacted with firefighters probably in the 10 up range. When I came on, I'm a city worker. Being a firefighter, it was Buffy or whatever. And now what we're seeing is they want to be firefighters. It's okay to love the job. It's okay to say, I'm into the job. And you meet those people, and they're very inspiring. And when we meet the 37-year person who still loves the job, and you're like, yes, I want that. I want more of that in my life. We want to be connected to those people. That's the people walk out the door, and you're like, this job. And it's like, no. It's been awesome. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful job.
So listening to some of the things that everybody has said so far, one of my favorite analogies, I've brought it up twice this week, and I think sometimes it was the analogy. I got to give credit to Justin Alexander. So as Phoenix was taking on the Final Four, and he's sitting in a room, it's the kickoff meeting for this event, and he looks at everybody and he says, I want you guys to start with yes. The answer is yes. We'll work our way to no if we can't do things, as we have a bunch of stakeholders coming in from all around the nation. And then he says, sometimes when we're swimming in the water, when we're in the fishbowl, we just don't think things are good, or we have this different perception than what other people have, as their eyes are against the outside of the fishbowl. And so when I think of second chance management and leadership and standards, I really think that second chance management looks different today than it did many years ago, when you're referencing our old fire chief. And so I think that's important. But I think holding the standard and remembering how the public sees us, what the community expects from us, what the little kids on the street, what our own kids, what our families think of us. I think we oftentimes lose sight of that because we do it day in and day out. So I look at it like my particular role in the organization is to maintain the standard, to remember what this job really means. And going back to, Kelvin's quote about, we're here for the people and to last 25 years. And when you lose that love and that passion for the job, that's when this job becomes more difficult to do. And so thank goodness the fire service allows us to shift in all different realms, from promoting to certifications to stations in every organization, and do different things to try to keep it fresh. Because I think when you lose sight of this, what the mission is, this job can wear on you.
So I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to ask a question. What does the community want from us? What does everybody in here believe that the community's expectations are of us?
Right out of the chute, I'll say I think that the community expects well-trained, professional, nice people. We're just there to solve their problem. Beyond that, I don't think that it matters to them. They just want us to show up and do a good job.
The only thing I would add is they want us to show up right now when it's an emergency. You know, like
Do they know what we're trained in?
I don't think so.
Everything. They think they
Yeah.
again, that's always
Maybe.
been, right? That's always been that if you dial 911, that if it's, a heart attack, cat stuck in the tree, to, there's a weird smell in the area, that we're going to figure all of that out. And for the most part, we do a pretty good job of it. I think that mission and that expectation continues to expand. To a point that I think that we're starting to have to look at where our limits, where any of us can manage because we can solve 99% of the problems, but there's going to be a 1 or 2% stuff that we're going to just have to say, we can't go there. We can't enter this realm.
Oh, I'm going to say it's a lot higher percentage of shit we can't fix, actually. But we need to start saying it, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. I'll let you answer.
I would just say, I think they expect that we'll come for them. Like, we're the organization that says we preach a message of we build fire stations for strategic locations. We look at all these things to take your money and to put well-trained firefighters. And when I need the system, you're there, and they expect us to come and be able to perform. And so the other auxiliary things that we do, and then so it just creates this. It's like, no, when I pick up the phone, and I've had to, like, my wife has called 911 from when I'm at work, because it always happens when you're on shift. My expectation was that company showed up and was able to bring calm to a chaotic situation, and that is a tremendous responsibility.
So how do we measure these expectations? So how do we know what the community wants from us? What methods do we have where we can actually measure that?
Well, I think it's like any institution. You have to kind of know your demographic, your community, and you have to ask them, right? I'll go right back to what we talked about before, clear as kind, right? We have pitched ourselves as an all hazards response to these communities, most of us, and because of that, I think that's the general expectation. However, I think the average citizen's like, I don't know, if I have an emergency, I call 911, and the overwhelming majority of people have never done it because it's scary to hit those buttons, right? I don't know actually what's going to happen if I do it. So there's an educational component that I think needs to come from our side. But I also think that the other side of that is a lot of this is driven by, maybe it's driven by the electeds and the fear and some of those things that are happening. Well, we have to be able to, I'll just use the example from Buckeye from many years ago, right? Well, we have a job that needs to be done, so we're going to go, rake, mow, and weed whack, and lower people into the ground in the graveyards, right? Is that really what the fire department should be doing? Now that was a pivot during a really tough financial time that kept jobs, etc. But is that what the community expects? I don't know. We have to ask them.
Well, so when a letter comes into the Buckeye Fire Department saying that the fire department did a good job, what are they saying?
Typically, it's they came out, they gave me great customer service, which usually looks like
they were nice to me.
They were good to me, and they took good care of us.
They fixed my problem, or did the best they could fixing my problem, right? Almost always, those are two really important components. That didn't have anything to do with how well trained we were. It didn't have anything to do with other than we treated them kindly, right? So we need to start thinking about our expectations and how we deliver service in what they truly want, because a lot of the other stuff is the bullshit that we put on it. This is what we believe the community wants from us because it fits what I want to do inside the organization.
Narrative. I will tell you, I'm going to push back on just a little bit.
Yeah, please go.
I think the average citizen doesn't know what it takes to fight a fire safely, appropriately, etc. I don't think they understand. Yeah, right. We are the subject matter experts in EMS, in fire suppression, in hazmat, in TRT. We need to the part the community expects is that we show up, that we do good work. They don't even know how to measure that, but they expect the fires to go out, the people to get pulled out of 100-foot holes. Like they expect people to be taken care of. So I think that we have to define how we deliver it and be clear and share that with the community. This is what we're capable of doing. And when we set that standard, then we hold the line. This is what we will do, and we hold ourselves accountable to that standard. I think the easy stuff that we sometimes lose sight of is what you're talking about, is how we show up for the community, how we turn out and go, hey, here's how we love you, and how we provide good service and take care of people. That's a part of the job that gets lost when Fireman Joe's like, hey man, I'm a door kicking, axe wielding, fire breathing savage. You will get the service I provide you. No, the community expects.
So what do they tell us when they're mad at us?
Exactly the opposite.
Usually starts the ones I've ever
That's a trick
seen.
question.
Yeah, they didn't.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
But
can. Yeah.
we weren't nice to them.
Yes.
We downplayed their problem.
Yeah.
Or we told them they were idiots. Or we're going to show up and I'm going to educate you on how you should better use the 911 system, right? So that had nothing to do with how well we were trained or how professional we were or how precise and amazing I am at my ACLS algorithms. It had nothing to do with any of that shit, right? So we need to actually start thinking about the things that that they like and actually do expect. Then we need to learn from the things that when they get pissed at us and say, those goddamn firemen did not help me. They did not do whatever it is that they wanted us to do. We need to learn how to avoid that stuff. We still got to be professional. We still got to be smart. We got to be badass. We're going to do grown up stuff, right? But we're mixing these mixed messages of what the community wants and we're coming for you and all this other stuff. Yes, it is true. The risk was always worth it. But there are boundaries to all of it. And the one thing that they expect is that we treat them with dignity, that we're nice to them, and that we do the best we can to take, and we don't make them feel like fools or morons for calling us. And we need to get to that. And the tolerance and the what we train on and managing mistakes and all of that should be focused on those things. We still got it. They don't care how awesome we are at EMS. They don't care how awesome we are at understanding ventilation profile, selecting the right attack position with the effective amount of gallons per minute. I don't think that's ever been written in a compliment to any of the fire departments, right? Man, they were nice. They showed up. They did some really amazing shit. And as our old boss would say, is they saved my pictures, pets, people, and pills. And so, like, we need to get back to what the community actually really wants, and not what we want to make it into.
Well, and to your point, we've talked about and said a building on the street corner could burn to the ground. It could be a vacant lot, but it's going to Mrs. Smith's house and not treating her right that causes so much heartache in the organization and problems for us.
Can we talk about what PIO photos get the most absolute love and likes?
Us putting oxygen on dogs.
Animals,
Pets and
critters.
kids.
Yeah, every little kitten, every little dog we save, those hit the heartstrings. And that goes right to what you're saying, Stu, is that this idea that the people want us to take care of them, and that involves treating them nicely, loving on them a little bit, and showing up for their family members when they're in crisis, and putting a hand on their hand, and holding a hand, and that's so important. What prompted you to say that, to bring that point up?
Well, because I think that we're trying to build a fire department narrative and training and process built around the shit we like about the job. Mm. Well, I actually agree. Like I love fire ground training. I love talking about fires. I love training for fires. I love reviewing fires. I like figuring that stuff. That's fantastic. But I also know that Mrs. Smith could give a rat's ass about that, right? And so we need to couple that passion and desire and what we think is important about the job and what we're good at with the things that actually will make a fire department successful. and how we stay on top of it. And I have this really cool petri dish, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but in the organization I work now, we're actually building a fire department, fire district, right? And kind of starting from a very, very small thing, and it's grown, right? We've increased the fire department by 50% in a year and a half. But we've been super deliberate about how we're doing it and the messages that we are giving to the firefighters so that the firefighters then can give to the community, how we're treating the firefighters, what we're training the firefighters on, what we are spending time, money, and energy on doing as a fire district and as leadership of the fire district, so that it actually directly impacts what they're doing for the community. And the theme that we're kind of running around here has everything to do with that. And when we see the challenges elsewhere, where they've lost that focus, or maybe they don't have that focus, is where, what, and why. So I'm going to connect it back to kind of what Kelvin's talking about, is the expectations. We've tried to change the expectations, and then I can brag a little bit. And so the guy that we're talking about, the quote, is he's my coworker now again, awesome. Which makes me really happy.
Oh, I'll talk about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, to Chris's point, I was maybe 5 years on the job, and I was in a class trying to learn how to be a firefighter, right? And you're learning, and it was a chief who's now retired, and he started his tactics and strategies class. And he started the class with a question about serving under-resourced or poor areas of our community. And when we go into those homes and they have a fire, how we, it's not a house that's in good repair. It's obviously someone who doesn't have a lot of financial. How do we treat them? How do we do salvage and overhaul them? How do we treat those people who don't have much, who probably don't have insurance? And then he showed a slide of like a house in Paradise Valley or Arcadia, somewhere in that area. He's like, how do we treat them? And he's like, they're the same. You treat them the same, with the same sort of dignity. And I mean, that was 17, 18 years ago. And I remember that being pivotal in my development, going, yeah, we shouldn't be, that's we're entering in their home. It's a respect, and it's a treating them the same way. And we're nice to them. We take care of their things. And that was, when you started talking, I immediately flashed back to that conversation where I was like, and that was ingrained on me very young, like treat them nice, like treat them well. Even if you don't think it's like valuable, you don't know, and it's not yours, and it's yours to provide to help them out.
So the feedback, and I'll just talk to the feedback. So it's awesome being in a small organization, running a lower volume of calls overall, right? Percentage wise, based on companies. Every single person that we run on gets a customer service survey from us, and within 30 days of the call. And we get 50 to 60% of them come back to us. So I know exactly what my customers are thinking about the service that they get delivered inside their inside our organization, that our folks. And the closest thing we've had, at least in my time frame, from closest thing we've had to have been a dissatisfied customer or somebody that had maybe less than positive feedback, was something where we tried to reframe what they really needed to be worried about. And it's like, okay, no, we're not here to educate you. We're here to do the best we can, fix your problem, and then we're going to go on about our business. So that assessment and that evaluation of how we take care of people and how we treat people and all that other stuff as our centerpiece to our organization, and then how we actually train our folks and set the expectations for them. Maybe there's something because I can say now 2 fire departments that I've personally worked for, I know when we were doing our best, and I know what we were focused on, what we were training on, and what we were connected to. And they're both doing a really good job right now. So,
do your members get to see that kind of in live feedback? Do they get to see?
I personally will share that. If I get something remarkable or something specific or instant or an interesting instance, I will actually share it with the whole department. I'll go, hey, just a reminder. I tell you, you're doing a good job, but don't listen to what I have to say. Here's exactly what Mrs. Smith actually wrote about you, at this on this incident.
I'm only assuming because I don't know your organization intimately, but I'm assuming when people see that value highlighted, that makes other people like that's our standard. You're preaching the standard of what the membership is already doing, and I find that very inspiring. That's awesome.
Yeah, my fire board. I have one of our fire board members actually reports on it every fire board meeting because she gets them before we get them. Because she's representing her constituency, the community, on our fire board for us. So we say, oh, no, it goes to you. You read them first. So I can't pull out the bad ones. I can't do any of that. And then we can talk.
We're not controlling the narrative.
Exactly.
We're just letting it be what it
Yep.
is.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Well, and on that note, I think at the very end of Kelvin's little quote in there, he talks about people don't remember what we did, what we said. It's how we made them feel. And to that very note, I think that in the fire service, it's the one thing, I like to call it the soft skills. I think it's the one thing we just don't do often enough. And I think every person in this room would say, I don't need to be rewarded or patted on the back. But boy, when you know that you impacted someone and you made a mark like that, I don't think anything feels better than that. We don't do it often enough.
Absolutely. It's interesting. We talk about internal and external customer service, and that is part of that. What I love about what you're saying, Stu, is it's very deliberate. And I love that you're asking that question. What we're doing, we're sending out, seeking feedback on how to do this job better. What does the community really want and need from us? And we understand that there's, the other piece of that is the insurance for the city and the districts, et cetera, and how do we provide that insurance in a meaningful way? But the human beings, how do we connect to people? And I think internally, we need to ask that same question. As leaders, am I listening? Am I listening to what the line folks are saying that they need? And there's we need more money, we need more time off, of course, right? But what else do they say that they're needing that you can facilitate? You got to listen. And it starts with,
well, when nothing else about your job feels good, you focus on money and time off.
Yeah, because you're not thinking about the long game. You're very short-sighted in that. It's just, what can I get today and squeeze out of this joint to get something for myself?
There was a quote that just came to mind. It was, you've tried talking your way out of problems, try listening your way out of them.
Yeah.
And that's actually on my phone.
Have you been talking to my wife?
No. It's one where I'm like, it's just a skill that I have to work on. Like, try just listening your way out of this problem. And that's difficult for a talker. I'm a verbal processor. I like to talk. I want to be in the, and you're like, just listen to what they're saying. Because then you're going to find out how to respond correctly to what they need. And that's my job, is to take care of you so you can go take care of the customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might learn not just what, but actually why.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. What other quotes stuck out to you guys that you want to touch on?
I got one. The Chief O'Neill quote about integrity over loyalty.
Okay, hold on. Let me get there real quick.
What's more important, loyalty or integrity? Well, being that operational thinker and knowing, I'm like, and being a Marine, and I was like, oh man, I never thought about it, or broke it down or defined it, and I was like, well, loyalty is important, man. Being loyal to your organization and your crew and your people, right, and your family. He's like, okay. He goes, can you be loyal to a fault? I was like, oh shit, like, yeah. And he goes, your integrity is who you are.
Why did that come up for you?
So we tend to use buzzwords. We pick up on things and buzzwords, and we talk about loyalty, and that becomes a very forward thing in the organization, because it's often tied to trust. There's trust and loyalty, and to a crew, to a specific the organization. We want you to come here. But that loyalty can be leveraged in the wrong way. Like, oh, this is what we're going to do. Don't you want to do, this is how we do business. And what I found the hardest parts of my career that I've struggled with internally is when that bumps up with my own integrity. And I'm not talking about things that are obviously wrong or immoral, but it's like standards or who you are or how you view things and how you treat people. I grew up all over the world, really, lived in different places, and that helped shape my perspective. Part of being integrity is part of saying, hey, your perspective, employee, is valid, and you have integrity. You have these issues. Let's talk about those, versus just be loyal to our dogma or our value system. We went through a value, mission, vision, value rebranding, and it came all from the membership. And one of the things that came out of that was we want to talk about being family. And for a lot of our members, family is not a good connotation. They didn't have good homes. That doesn't resonate with them. And we talk about being a family, and for them, it's something different. So that integrity piece is me modeling the right values. It's me showing that at every level, and the organization having it. I think when we see leaders who have integrity, we want to follow them. We want to do what they say. And when we don't have, and I'm not talking about changing your mind. Like you can change my mind a million times about subjects, whether it's fireground or leadership or cultural, but being true and nice and doing what we say we're going to do, and treating people actually well, not just gaslighting them, like actually holding those standards. Man, those are the people that I gravitate to, and that's the kind of leader I want to be. So when he said that, I was like, yeah, that really just kind of struck that, like, yes, that integrity piece is huge, which is interesting. It's the second part of our value statement is integrity right after family. But it's just so important. We're in people's homes. We see them at the worst. We also see our brothers and sisters at their worst. We see when they're struggling with, hey, can I trust you with this problem? Because I'm really going through it right now. That's a huge piece. Are we holding that value to the highest level?
So integrity can be terrifying to people that struggle with their own integrity.
All right, podcast over. Mike.
Yeah, so integrity, I freaking love it. It's one of the very few things that I personally will worry about or try to actively manage is my own integrity. But the world is full of people who have challenges to their own personal integrity, and so when people feel strongly, or when people are reasonably effective at managing their own integrity, that can be intimidating as shit.
One of my friends said, in the times in my life when I was the most I had the most probably people's trust, I had the most time trusting people, is when I was the most untrustworthy. Like, and so you just vow, like the times that I've struggled when it's like, I know I shouldn't be doing this, and I'm doing it anyway. And then I see that behavior in somebody else, and I'm like, you don't do that. Like, and it's like, oh no, that's me. I'm projecting my own like vulnerability and failure here. And when you're visible, as everyone in this room is in their organization, eyes are on you. And it's like, it's tough when they're like, but you did. And you're like, you're right, I did. I'm sorry. I will do better. That's terrifying is a great word. I've been using scary and terrified a lot lately, but it's just because the paradigm is changing for me, and seeing the weight of where you are at and holding yourself accountable. Yeah, hard.
And so with that, I'm gonna take this thing and go with a positive spin on it again. And again, it's gonna go back to just the power of that. And so I was really lucky that early on in my career, I worked with just a firefighter that never promoted, never did move
Smart,
from that position.
Lucky guy.
Named Jeff Whitaker. So when I came to meet Jeff, he had 25 years on the job, and he's working in the backseat of a fire truck. And I had to, it was work for me to make sure that I got to the station at around 7 a.m. with him, because he was already there cleaning. He was all like, he, as someone in the backseat, was the standard that I've tried to hold myself to, from his example of how we treated people, his standard of around the station and training and just being a good senior firefighter, and the impact that person had on me was one of the most important relationships and mentors that I ever had. And it wasn't someone from the top of the organization. It was a guy sitting in the back seat of the truck, just doing the work and doing the right things every single day. And when I think on my own, path and movement through the organization and going upward, like, I come back to the example that firefighter in the back seat taught me, and I think to myself, am I living up to his expectation of what I want to be and what I want to do with my time on the job? And I haven't worked with Jeff, he's been retired many, many years, and I haven't been on his truck in, I don't know, probably 15 years. But his example is still the standard that I hold myself to. And it's because of his level of integrity and level of personal accountability.
It's crazy how much weight that carries. I'll name drop another Phoenix firefighter. So Brian McQuaid, like I knew Brian through TRT and stuff, and he called me one day about a person who was testing for us. And what he said about that person carried so much weight. I was like, well, I know how Brian, I've seen how he conducted himself, and I've heard what his peers have said about him, and his integrity and his work ethic, his opinion counted. And he was 100%. We ended up hiring that person, and I was like, it's been it's a great hire for us, and it's like, yeah, he wasn't just calling, hey, my butt. It's like, no, his integrity and his work ethic carried weight. And I think that's awesome. It carried weight for you.
Yeah.
Those people who modeled the leaders that I follow, they model that integrity. I'm like, I want to be more like that.
It's such a interesting topic to me because it's so weighty, and people find themselves wrestling with their integrity. And I'm like, I like to think that I am a man of integrity. But I can point to times in my life when I did not live in integrity, and those dark periods are interesting to reflect back on, because I think we're all in this like evolution in our lives. We're trying to grow and trying to be better, and so I think about that, and I think, man, it can be easy for folks to get stuck in these places, but you have to be willing to do the work to pull yourself past that, because you can find yourself in just this circle and this spiral, and the world gets really toxic and horrible and just shitty. So start with examining yourself. Am I living with integrity? What does it even look like? And then make steps forward.
It's easy to stand in the breach when you have integrity, when you have problems. And it's I think for me at least, there's challenges that are going to put yourself out there, and you know that it's going to be controversial. A friend of mine once said, if you're going to be the tip of the spear, you're going to kill some people. And I'm like, I don't want to kill anybody. But it was that idea. If you're going to be out in the front, or you're going to step up and you're going to say, this is wrong, that takes a lot of courage. But when you're matched with your integrity, it's a no-brainer. I have to do this. I can't not do it. It is something that I feel so strongly about that I'm willing to put myself out there, and you can sleep easy at night. It's the times when I've ignored it and I'm like, just kind of push it away. And I'm pushing up against my own integrity. And it's like, nope, can't do that. I need to vocalize this. I need to work towards a solution with grace and a second chance management, but we have to address it.
So I'm going to give you a little story where I found myself in a bad spot. I was an acting captain, and I was getting a little salty. And I had a very senior firefighter, Mike Velasquez, working on my truck. He was on a special operations move over from one station to another, and to help us cover a shortage. And he was there it was going to be for several months. Anyways, 3 a.m, we go on a call, and we've got this 20-something-year-old kid who's drunk as a skunk and falling asleep. And I'm like, my new rule is if I'm up, you're up. So this kid's falling asleep, and I give a little finger thump to his eyeball, his closed eyelid. Bunk. He wakes up. Oh, he keeps falling asleep, and he's falling asleep. Now, meanwhile, we're waiting on the Lark van to show up. We've got PD with us. There's a gaggle of firefighters and PD standing there, and I'm being the prick. Wake up. Boom. Well, I like to think I am a person who provides a very high level of service, and I take care of people, and I love on people, and I was outside my integrity. So we go back to the station. We send this kid off. He goes and gets sober. I don't know what happened to him. We go back to the station, go back to bed, wake up in the morning at whatever. I come out, and Mike's out there packing his bags. And I'm like, all right, Mike, we'll see you next shift. And he goes, hey, man, I gotta tell you something. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's up? He says, someday you're going to get promoted to be a captain, and you're probably going to be okay. You're going to do okay. You're going to do a good job. You're going to be a good captain. I was like, oh, thanks, man. All right, unsolicited a compliment. This is fantastic. And he goes, but I'm going to call South Deputy today, because if this is how we're going to treat people, I don't want to work on your truck. And I was fucking crushed immediately. I stepped outside my values because of fatigue, because of malaise, whatever. I just got outside myself. I was getting an ego. I'm this, big, bad to the bone acting captain. I got this all figured out. And I started treating people crappy. This kid in particular. Mike had the integrity to call me out on my bullshit. And I will tell you what, he saved my career, because in that moment, I immediately turned to him and I said, Mike, you are 100% right. I own that. I was being an absolute prick, and that'll never happen again. Please stay on my truck. He stayed. I course corrected, and I remember that shame, right? I felt such shame and fixed it and went on. And now I reflect back on it. I tell the story to you guys. I reflect on that moment where I was outside my values, outside my integrity, and the lesson learned. And so we have to I go back to what I was saying before, which is we have to identify those opportunities and say, okay, I got to be better. I can't continue to be this person. Now, I think you have to have integrity to do that. So that's the starting point. But
yeah, it was really interesting. I was just at a conference, and one of the first keynote speakers, she was talking about basically PTSD and trauma in the fire service. And one of the things that made her keynote so different is she talked about organizational integrity, and when our organizations violate the integrity, what that does to our membership, and actually the result of not only bad calls, but when our organizations are bad to our members and they don't have organizational integrity, and how they're tracking that. The surveys that she was doing and getting back, there was calls, right? Certainly the stuff that we see and that we're exposed to, but there was an alarming number of, you don't care about me. And this is how you're showing it, right? Call volumes tripled, and you're not communicating to me how we're going to do this, or we're doing this program and you haven't done whatever, right, wrong, or indifferent. The firefighter wants to be heard, and our breaking organizational integrity is harming them. It's just, and that is, I was sat there and I just kind of put my pen down. I'm like, I've never thought about it that way. I never thought that it's the way we structure, the way we talk about things is going to hurt people if we break the organizational integrity.
Yeah, we have to do what we say we do, right? We can write manifestos and hand them out, but if we as an organization don't actually execute on those things, we're violating our own integrity, and we're not being honest with our folks.
It becomes intentionally, right away, it becomes cliche as soon as we're not. People are like, oh, here it comes again. You're like, no, this is not it. And man, I don't know how to navigate all that yet. Hopes to get better at it. But you can see it to a T. And you talk to firefighters from every single fire department that you interact with, and they will point to something about the organization, and it's usually around some sort of integrity issue that made them go, oh, just didn't feel right.
What's another quote from the podcast?
Again, the one that's kind of, I guess, selfishly because it relates to me is talking about exposures and.
Oh yeah.
Gosh dang it.
Was it the one with Dawn Bolstead?
I think Kepra talked about the cardiac exposures.
Cardiac exposures, yeah. But it was actually from a female perspective about breast milk and pumping.
That was Dawn. I got you.
And again,
that wasn't me.
All right, so Dawn Bolstead, listen to this.
She told me her story. She found out she was pregnant. She was put on light duty, immediately taken out of the field, so no exposures during her pregnancy. She went on maternity leave, had a healthy baby, elected to breastfeed her baby, which a lot of moms do because you're trying to give your baby the best. And she came back to work her first shift, and she got a fire. And she said, when is it safe to feed my baby? And so she had already vetted out with La Leche League and all these breast milk, communities that, when moms are having trouble getting breast milk to come in, or the volume is too much or the volume is too small, or all the issues that you have with breastfeeding, and nobody had any data on exposures. Yeah. And I'd like to point out too that even though your audience may not consist of a lot of female firefighters, the men should pay attention to the study. And the reason is because every firefighter that has been to a good fire, and you can smell that fire for 3 days later. Oh, yeah. And I've heard guys say, tell me what's taken 3 days to get out of my body. And the breast milk is a way to capture that.
I think that it kind of a shift of what we've been talking about, but when we were looking at the quotes, especially there at the end, when she mentions the, that this isn't just a women's issue, this is an us issue. And then especially with my own experience with it, and there's no one in this room, right, that isn't at some point in time already experienced a cancer or cancer scare, or someone directly connected to them. Like it is the biggest, kind of shadow that is over the fire service as a whole, right? Like it's the thing that's there. And so for me, I think the powerfulness of this, and we're at the front end of it, of trying to do things to identify and get better to make organizational and fire service changes here. I don't know if the national conversation is quite at the level that it is maybe here in the Valley, but it's going to come. It's the next great battle of the fire service is how do we do this? How do we at the membership level, like how do you mentally wrap yourself around that now with the expectation of a minimum of a 25-year career, right? That we talk about that longevity and retention of folks, recruitment. How do you, if we're not looking at that level, I think that's going to continue to be things that we struggle with. And then at the top end of it is organizationally, is how do we protect our folks? How do we allow us to go and do the things that the community expects of us to do, which I don't think that there's a desire for any of us to change what that expectation of how we go and do about our job. But how do we do it safe? How do we survive that? And so I think that's just such a big, powerful thing that especially in my life is there that I pay attention to. And especially as I am moving up in the organization, that I think about and how I interact.
So you are currently...
So I have leukemia, not something that like you don't fix it, right? It's there, it's in my system. So when you look at like my leukemia specifically, it is a pretty common cancer for people that are 65 and over. I am currently 46. So they did a study where they followed hundreds of thousands of people with CLL. Mayo Clinic did it, and they did a 20-year study on my cancer. The numbers of people that are over 65 was like 95% of it. There was a handful, like a couple of thousand people out of hundreds of thousands in their 50s, and the people in their 40s there was less than 1,000 of them in the entire study of hundreds of thousands of people. And so when you look at it with people that my age that get it, it is directly connected to heavy metal exposure and heavy solvent exposures. And, and I have not, again, by my own admission, I have not been at the superstar firefighting stations for the lion's share of my career. I've had a decent amount of fires. I've had a good firefighter stuff, but I've spent most of my career at a technical rescue station, walking up and down mountains. So even my exposures is I was going to say lower and better than a lot of other members in the fire service. And then I have this really rare form of cancer for someone my age, and it's probably from a single incident. And so it comes back to the critical, understanding that it is one fire, one fire, and making bad decisions during overhaul, which, we grew up in that time that it was hot outside. You took off all your stuff. And if you didn't come out of the fire as the young guy that's the most dirty, the most covered in, the most black, that, blowing snot boogers black out of your nose 3 to 5 days later, like you were doing it wrong. And so that major shift of mindset is just becomes so important for us. And again, it's because we came in and we all knew that the job was dangerous. We all knew that these things were there as an underlying. But it came in, and I think it's come in like a truck and hit most of us with like, oh man, like that became a real thing way faster than I think that we expected. And so that's why that quote specifically is just so powerful to me.
So with this known exposure, right, that we are, this is latent damage, latent issue that's waiting for us. How do we help our membership? How do we help our folks manage or ameliorate the risk here? Because it exists.
Well, we still don't take it seriously.
Say
the
more
fire
about
service
that.
doesn't take we talk about it, and I will say this, Chris, just from my most recent experiences, because I'm now a member of the Public Safety Occupational Cancer Alliance. I sit on that committee. The Valley might actually be behind most other places. What I'm learning, and they're not bad, but we think we're doing more than most, and I'm not sure we are. And then the other part is that we're focused on certain things, exposures, right? We're very focused on that. Yet, how many people we work with still chew?
You're not allowed to talk about that.
Yeah, hold on. Zins are safe.
Yeah.
They have the, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
No, man.
How many?
As you drink the third energy drink
Yeah.
and you're eating processed stuff and putting
And
Zins in.
and we
you're
drink
like,
alcohol every night, and we sleep shitty, and we do. So we're not managing all of it. So if we're going to take it serious, let's actually start taking it serious.
Yeah.
And it's creating a culture of survival, overall survival. So there's always been things that are killing us in the fire service, right? It was fires and buildings falling and fuss falling out of apparatus and off the back of apparatus and all these other things, right? And now it's morphed into there are metabolic things that are starting to get us, and none of those things got better until we actually took it seriously. And we actually started doing things and acknowledging it and acting like grown-ups to manage those types of issues. And so there are a lot of positive things that I know locally we've done that are making a difference in exposure control and those type of stuff. But it is attitude and mentality, and it is when are we going to actually take all of it seriously. And I'll also go as far as to say this is we need to also think about how we're addressing the problems, because just simply scanning and testing firefighters until we find cancer is not a solution either. And that's our pendulum has swung, right? We didn't do anything, and now I am going to do every single test on you until I actually find cancer. That's not a successful way to manage that either. And so there is behavior and performance modifications that firefighters need to make. There's systemic modifications that healthcare, occupational health, public health, all those folks need to do to help us. There's a ton of research that still needs to happen on behavior or cancer and things that are causing it. So one of the things that we're looking, that I'm just lucky enough to be a part of, is we're looking at some of firefighter behavior, and we just sent out a survey nationally about firefighters' behavior and their mentality towards safety, towards exposures, and because it's not until we address how firefighters are approaching these things, we will not fix it over here. We have to modify their behavior by modifying their values in order to get it to take place. And so I've actually tried to get the Valley to participate in this, and I'm getting a bunch of crickets. I'm getting crickets from union guys. Hey, let's go. Quit talking about it. Let's actually do some stuff here. So it's an interesting system.
Is the reluctance driven by cost, or
it's
is it
denial? They're human beings.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say behavior change is incredibly difficult to do. And so this idea that, we're going to change culture and change the way folks behave, man, that's tough. I could see that being that's a really tough thing to try to tackle.
But until we actually address it and can measure it and say it's the whole, what does the customer think, the community think of it? I strongly believe through feedback that the community does not expect us to die on the fire ground, and they don't want us to die from cancer. Just in general terms, they don't want that. They don't think that's expected part of the job, right? Yeah. So when are we going to start taking it seriously? They don't want it to happen to us. When do we not want it to happen to us?
Well, and so what I'm hearing from you too is a little bit of personal accountability. And oftentimes I think people look to their organization to protect them. And the organizations have every system in place, and we continue to try to improve on that every day. But if we don't do that system and use that system as it is intended all the way through, I'll give a for example, right? Coming out of a fire, not unclicking until you get washed off. I mean, think about it. How easy is it for us just to, nah, I'm not going to do that, right? Work till I'm vibrating, come out, now I need to unclick. So again, all these systems in place that we just don't tend to, we kind of get a little complacent with it. But there's definitely a personal accountability piece to this.
So no matter how badass we have no matter how awesome our incident commanders are, no matter how awesome our incident command system is, our training, our experience, all this other stuff, if individual firefighters don't manage their air in the hazard zone, they will die. Or they have a high propensity to dying on the fire ground. And so the system, it's the individual responsibility. And so there's parity, or there's parallels to it in a lot of different areas of our job we need to take seriously.
One of the things that I've heard you say many times, and this speaks to personal accountability, is the organization or the leader can't care more than the individual, right? So we can write all the policies and put all the edicts on, provide the programs and do all the things. But if you're like, listen, dude, I'm just going to chew tobacco, regardless of what the potential consequences are, how do you outperform that if the individual doesn't give a damn? You don't.
Yeah, we talk about ownership. But there's this personal ownership in our own careers. And it's interesting to me as you talked, I think about certain individuals in my organization that made significant life changes. So whether that was quitting drinking, diet changes, have done everything. And what happened around them to the people who became like, man, it was infectious. You now start watching this change, and it came from people. We have a member, I was just an RTO with him. I don't know how many thousands of days he's worked out in a row. And he's David Goggins' clone. If you walk through the room and be like, hey, there's Goggins. Like, he is an amazing human being. It is disciplined. And the people that he silently influenced by his own change. And I think that's what we need more of. I mean, I had when the cancer initiative stuff and the decon and our policies came out, we had an RV fire, right? And we essentially just glorified car fire. And I made the firefighters in the truck go through our decon process, bag our stuff. We ride on, and I got crap for it. Mm-hmm. It's just car fire. Yeah, that's the worst. And it was just this piece. It's like, oh, you're a captain now. And I was like, no, man. Like the best advice I got before I became a captain is somebody told me you're ultimately responsible for their performance, safety, and well-being. And I'm like, dude, you got little kids. I want you to have a career. I want you to retire and go wax surfboards in Thailand. Like, I want you to experience that. But you got to make that choice. I can't force you to do it, and that's a hard one. Put the Zens down. They're horrible for you.
So we talk about change, and this is one of those examples, right? This threat has come up and is emerging, and I want to point to. I'm going to bring Dennis Compton back into the conversation. Okay, so we talk about that. We use this quote, right? We say this all the time. Firefighters hate two things: change and the way it is. Okay, and here's what Chief Compton had to say about that, because we blame firefighters for everything.
Firefighters are resistant to change. I've seen that through my entire career. Okay, but so are chief officers.
They're firefighters. They just weren't. You just got a different. You're in an office, and rather than someplace else, they're exactly the same. But they were brought up in the same system, and the same process, and the same values, and the same culture, and all that. So they are no different.
But their job is to lead change.
No, that wasn't one of the questions they were asked. No, honestly,
yeah,
they don't look at it that way, and they don't. And well, it'll go back to the first Dennis quote: Quit bullshitting people with being an expert just because you've promoted to a certain position in the organization. They lose touch with that, and then they become resistant to change because they have to change, not because it's hard for everybody else, but they actually might have to do it different, and they're not disciplined or give a shit enough or whatever it is to actually be able to lead it.
Yeah.
I've lived in an organization that has been in a perpetual state of change since the day I got hired. Like, we have never, when we talk about baseline consistency, I look in my mind and I can break it down to like this era, this era, this era, this era. And it's at the speed of relevancy because of growth and then retraction and then outside influence. And just that's how I grew up. I was 20 when I started. So when I hear change, for me, it's like, oh, what are we doing this week? Like, what are we changing to? But the part about it that I've come to realize is that the people leading that change, when they communicate where we're at, like, and why we're doing those things, the troops seem to fall. Like, they just want to know why. Like, why are we doing this? We have a hot topic going on right now, and people just don't know. And when they explain to them, they're like, okay, but that's really vulnerable to be the leader on that side, because it's like, hey, we're changing, and this might change again in 6 months. We just had an RBO meeting where one of the things that I thought was so profound that came out of it, somebody in the corner raised their hand and said, hey, we need to communicate that over the next 6 months that this could change, so that our membership knows that we still have to work some things out. Like, and I thought that was like, hey, that's really smart to communicate that to our members, that we don't have all the answers. This room is trying to figure it out, but when we have this deployment model, it may have to change. And that means we may have to change policy. We may have to change all of that. It's a lot of work too. It's just a lot to go back in there and re-educate, to rewrite policy, to rewrite deployment. And I think sometimes, I'm like, I don't want to go back and do that again, but we have to. We have to be willing to correct back to integrity. Hey, we're not doing it right.
And I also think as a chief officer, you're operating at the level where you're expected to carry the message. And if you don't always disagree with the message, sometimes there's a lot of work involved trying to go understand it, because the questions will come to you. And so I think you just have to try to get to the organizational level to understand why we're doing what we're doing, how it works, be able to answer the questions. And I believe that's where some of the resistance comes from. It's just not having the right information to carry the message all the way down.
Very few times in my experience as a whatever level of a boss in an organization where we had to do something difficult or something that was unpopular or whatever, did I experience a ton of resistance when the people that were having to make the change actually understood why. Mm-hmm. And the why was way more important than agreeing with it. And because firefighters tend to be fairly understanding of a lot of things. And when we actually were doing things for the right reason and we could thoroughly explain why in a genuine way, we didn't have to like make shit up or bullshit people about things, then they were like, yeah, okay, I wish we didn't have to do this, or I don't like how we do this, but okay, and then you try and demonstrate, okay, we're all in this together. We're going to all try and make this work, right? So I can remember very specifically pushing back on certain things in my old organization like, why don't you give a shit about this? And I'm like, well, as soon as it's important to you as the highest level of the organization to do it right, it will be important enough for me to give a shit about it. And so
we'll move heaven and earth, the things we get behind. Chief Higgins just came into this last recruit academy, and he talked about the Tarver fire, and I mean, from a very vulnerable place, and most of those recruits weren't there, right?
They weren't even alive.
Some of them weren't even. I have my academy belt was older than one of the recruits in my company. So, but it was like, and I'm not that old. But when I was sitting there thinking about that story, and I had heard that story, the different parts of that from different captains who had been there. But when he was telling it, what I thought about was I was just first on the job when the recovery study was going on. So we were doing, and Olive Valley was participating. I was a booter. And man, we changed. And we point back to that because that was a significant change in fireground operations, right? Well, when we want to change something, we'll do it. We'll move forward. We'll push back. I mean, we have hot topic going on right now, vertical ventilation and all the change that we're doing there and all those things.
Now we're going to get to it.
Yeah. I knew that.
I'm fucking ready.
Yeah, but it's like, as we move, as we look at science and as we change, when we want to get behind something, I've watched us do it. We solve problems and we're willing, we all get behind. And that's the key now is like, how do we is this an issue we're all willing to get behind? And do we really care about it? Are we really going to put our money behind it, our time behind it. I'm new to budgeting. And I look at budget and you're like, I want all the shiny stuff. And they're like, well, you got to do all this stuff first. And I'm like, like I want to, and it's like, no, that's the priority. If we're going to do it, let's focus. Let's get the boat rowing in the same direction. And to your point, that starts at the top. I think that starts with us.
So the change, when everything's critical, nothing's critical, right? Yeah. So you got to be really specific about what you need to change, because you can't change everything, and everything can't be at the tip of the spear. So figure out what's really organizationally important, focus on it, and then you're right. We can get if we truly buy in, man, we'll do some pretty amazing things. But when it's diluted, it's distracted, everything's trying to be important, we're trying to change everything, then we tend to nothing happens.
What was the quote we had? We spoke about a couple of days ago. We're the adversary. Like it's worthy for us to get behind. It's something that we culturally say is a worthy mission. And firefighters tend to, we all have our own ideas of what's important. We could all go around this room and we would all have, dyed in the wool ladder guy. And I'm like, wait, you're going to take this away from me? And it's like, okay, no, why? Why are we talking about this? Why are we doing this? And that's like, okay, like, can we get behind each other's cause? Can we be a champion for someone else's cause? Can we say, hey, the landscape of social media and the fire service is changing. We need to champion those people who are moving the boundaries and doing the good work, because we have to change. And that's selfless, and that's really hard, because it's not my project. It's not your project. It's this person's project. And that's...
Oh, you were talking about, sorry, you were talking about just cause.
Just cause, that's what it was, yeah.
What is our just cause?
What's our just cause here?
I want to bring one last quote in, and then we'll wrap, which is the Frank Lieb quote. There was a person in my career who used to say, and he probably still does, he might be in this room, he would say, we're all running around the city with a 4-leaf clover crammed up our wazoo and thinking that we're doing great work. And so listen to this quote from Frank Lieb. He kind of touches on that. And he's talking about the FDNY and the nature of this organization as a training organization, and how they stay ahead of things. I think it's really important. Listen to this one.
We're a learning organization. We're a high reliable organization. We track our small failures. We track what's going on. Our procedures are process based, not outcome driven. Because outcomes, you could get good outcomes just because you were fortunate or lucky,
all the time.
And luck's not a strategy or a tactic.
4-leaf clover.
Hope is not a good plan.
So accidental success is not actually success. So Frank talks about it better than the vast majority of the people in the fire service. So we need to do a better job with feedback loop in our performance. And where does that happen? That happens at critiques, right? Whether it's immediate tailboard type after action, like right now, let's talk about this, or it's more organized, formal, looking at something and breaking it down and coming to some key recommendations or why things occurred the way they did. And so we need to be good at two things. We need to be good at understanding when we did a good job, why did we do a good job, and help everybody understand why it was a good job. If we lucked into doing a good job, we have to demonstrate that we cannot rely on luck, and that we actually have to say, okay, these are the decision points that went into doing a good job here. Let's do it again. And then you actually can practice it and train it and rehearse it and sets and reps, all that kind of stuff. And then when we don't do a good job, we need to be able to say we didn't do a good job. Like, be grown up enough to go, yeah, that was not good, or this part of it wasn't good. Doesn't mean we're all shitty people. Doesn't mean we're all terrible firefighters. Doesn't mean our careers are all ruined now because of it. It was, we did today, whatever happened, whatever process was in place, we didn't do a good job. So let's say we didn't do a good job. Let's identify what it is. Let's remember what it felt like to not do a good job. And then let's say, here are the things that we can actually work on to actually make us better, and why those things happened. That tends to be what we need to do better. And then utilize it and train on it, and then measure the next time it happens and talk about it. Because so there is not a fire department now, I'll say a metropolitan fire department now, that does not have an attorney that is part of their executive process. And so that attorney then is given, based on the executives and the fire chief, that attorney then is given a certain set of credibility in opinions of the organization. And what's the attorney's job there to do? The attorney's job there is to protect the organization and the bigger organization, typically the city, at all costs. Deny, deflect, discredit, whatever. They've got all kinds of amazing tactics that they've been working on for hundreds of years. And so then fire departments and fire chiefs start focusing all of their reaction to performance issues with that. And then we don't admit anything. Then we don't get any better. We don't improve anything. We don't acknowledge stuff. And then we can explain away our mistakes. And no, it wasn't our fault. Somebody else's fault. Had to be somebody else's fault. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. So there's performance issues that impact the community, and then there's performance issues that impact firefighters. So Frank says a lot of stuff that matters, and it matters to me personally. And we need to do a better job in a big way of learning how to do better. Constant state of fixing ourselves.
Agreed.
And so just even kind of something that you talked about in there, and it was a conversation that I had with my chief just the other day, was how do you tell someone that they fucked up on a fire scene, but do it in a way that's still productive and still a teachable moment? Because again, it's yelling at someone feels really good sometimes, right? It just like, what were you like? God damn it, man. But they instantly shut down. You lose that connection. You lose that teachable moment and that conversation. And so that was the conversation I brought up with him, is because like, hey man, we're going to have to go talk to this guy. What is your advice on how to do this? Because you've been a training chief. You've come through the organization for a long time. And he goes, here's my piece of advice that I've gotten and that I've used. He goes, go ask that guy questions. He goes, go ask them questions on what their mindset was and see what led them to make those decisions. And then through that conversation, you have your mindset and you know where you want to go with it. You go, but now you've engaged them into that conversation, and you go, okay, well, this is what you saw. This is what the decisions you made. This is what I saw. These are, and find that opportunity to make those corrections. And then the most important piece of all of that is you've had this conversation with that individual to not make them feel, embarrassed, that it's an actual conversation and not just coming down on them. But now, okay, we're going to come together and we're going to share this with the group. Because again, me fixing that at the individual level is important. He goes, but if everyone else on the scene thought that we did a really good job there, except me and this guy that had this conversation about a corrective action, we've done nothing. Like, that guy might not make that decision again, but none of the young guys, none of the next level of decision makers that are going to come through your organization are going to understand why those decisions were made, why they were important. And then you can, just like Frank kind of talks about in his quote there, is that you don't have to make those mistakes. Like, you can listen and be a part of a training to gain value out of it. And so whether it's on a fire ground or in a, running a section of the organization and trying to do things, when we make a mistake at any level, like, you have to engage that conversation to gain the mindset of what caused those poor decisions to be made and what piece of it that might have been missed. And I think that sometimes that we don't do we've done a lot of critiques. I've been a part of a lot of critiques that everyone on the fire ground knew something there didn't go right. And we go, good job, boys. Fire went out, everyone go home.
Yeah.
Participation trophy of the fire service. Fire went out, everyone went home.
Yeah. And so it is. And everyone there usually like, well, why did you even bring us together? Like you as the commanding officer on this incident brought us all together to talk about this scene. And we all want to know, like, okay, we still got here to the end somehow, fiddle fucking through it. You go, but you have to have those hard conversations.
Well, and it's not missing the teachable moment. There is a teachable moment that oftentimes, for whatever reason it is, we skip past that piece. And you talked about asking questions. I always think of you, Stu, because I think you do this really well. It's never about being right or wrong, but you allow people to be vulnerable in how you ask the question. We are encouraged to be critical thinkers, think on the fly, under pressure. And oftentimes we never want to be wrong, right? We don't want to be shamed in public. We're embarrassed, but boy, I try to emulate a lot of the way you ask questions to people. I've listened to you do it on critiques, on Teams meetings, on big incidents, and you allow people to kind of bare their bellies and say, well, this is what I was thinking. And you come back with what about this? And it's never about being right or wrong. And I think that's a skill that a good skill to master.
Chief, you hit it right on the head when you said it's not about being right or wrong. That when I have had leaders like, hey, what were you thinking there? What was going on? When they disarmed it, when it's not about right or wrong, it's about making you better, and then somebody else can learn on scholarship. Like that it's like you made it, you made that mistake. Hey, this isn't about shaming you. This isn't about you being wrong. This is about us being better at our job. And this is about making sure that we give that information out. And that just makes it feel comfortable. You're like, okay, cool. Like I had a chief one time ask me, it was a critique, said, what would you do different? What would you do the same? And I was like, oh, he knows what I would do different. I passed that plug and I went in on tank, whatever. And he's like, hey, here's what we did. And okay, let's think about this, this, and this. And I was like, I felt him, even though I messed up, I felt more empowered. And now there's a teachable moment to my crew. And it made me feel like I had ownership in that scene, even though what he was trying to get me to do was change my behavior. It did change a tactic. And I was like, okay, now somebody else gets to learn that. And it felt, that's a skill. And I don't know if that's teachable or innate, but that's a skill that some people have that I am very envious of.
Yeah.
So you know where you get that ability to do that? Not at the scene. It happens way before. So you actually have to think about people do. I'm not putting myself in this situation. I'm thinking about people that I am willing to listen to and people that I'm not willing to listen to, right? And so, and people I'm willing to take feedback from and people I'm not willing to take feedback from. I guess at this point in my life, I have a line. And so the people I'm willing to take feedback from are the people that I actually know that they care. They've demonstrated that they've cared. They demonstrate that they care about the big picture. They've demonstrated that they care about the people involved in the process. And then the opposite is true for the ones that I don't want to listen to, right? And so if you want to be that person in the critique that can ask questions or do that type of stuff, it's gonna be made at the kitchen table. It's going to be made at the station. It's going to be made playing cards. It's going to be made all these training, all these other places. And the only time one of the few times you're going to get to use it is as an IC or in the critique. And that's, they think oftentimes people think the position just gives them the ability to do that. And it doesn't in a real way.
You touched on exactly what I want to hit, which is the time in, the relationship building. A lot of what this job requires, and I say this job, I mean, but from the brand new line firefighter through the fire chief, is about building trust with one another. And if I'm going to come in and have a really hard conversation and tell you a really hard thing, you have to trust that I'm not going to hurt you and eviscerate you or ruin your career. And that, and telling somebody a hard thing on the fire ground in front of a bunch of people, there's an art form to that. But it starts with trust and that relationship. And that, you talked about building it at the firehouse. That's exactly right. And if you're a command officer and you're not around all your guys, well, that's a problem. You need to put some time in. You need to be going to the stations and having lunch and investing in those relationships. And, the first thing you talked about when we first started talking about this quote was you talked a little bit about integrity, right? That's what this boils down to. And this is part of the theme of what we've been talking about this whole entire time. The themes are very interwoven, right? And if we operate with integrity and we build trusted relationships, we're going to be way more successful. If we're serving with this desire, I already just forgot what it was. What was the statement we called it? a just cause.
Yeah, just
right?
cause.
If we identify a just cause and we have an infinite mindset, we're thinking beyond ourselves, right? We're thinking about the long range vision of this organization and the fire service at large. These other things will start to take care of themselves, right? When we talk about cancer prevention and things like that, well, if our mindset is I must decon from a fire, that's how I protect myself. That's very narrow-minded and very limited. We have to be going well beyond that. What else can I do, right? I love that Nicole Minnick was the firefighter who went in and said, is it safe? Good question, right? And so as a fire service leaders, we have to go, oh, hell yeah, that's a great question. And then what's the next question after that? And then how are we with an eye toward taking care of our folks so that they can be successful on the fire ground, successful on EMS calls, successful in retirement, right? Healthy and all those things on into their old age.
First part of that quote was, we're a learning organization.
Yes.
And that takes integrity, that takes vulnerability, that takes communication. And that is the type of organization that I want to be a part of, but it takes intentional work.
So Chief Lieb told me, he goes, we are a training organization. We train, every tour we come in and it's about training. And I was like, hold on. He did talk about pushing out just-in-time training for changing things, because we change stuff every month. And I'm like, FDNY, he's like, oh yeah, policy's changing all the time. Change. And I said, how does an organization the size of FDNY institute changes? And it's what you're talking about. They're an organization of integrity. The membership comes in knowing that changes are going to happen, and we want to do changes. We want to be better. We're a learning organization. We want to grow. We want to be more effective. And every tour, this is one of the things he said, every tour, the expectation is you're training. You're training every tour. That's the expectation of the organization. And that goes all the way down to the line guys, every person on the organization.
They actually trust him as the training chief to change the organization. And not, and his bosses don't go, oh, wait a minute. That sounds scary. Where did you get that? I haven't heard of that. I don't think that's real. Well, let me ask somebody. I don't think it's okay. No, that ain't part of the conversation. I put you in the position to do the job. I expect you to do the job. Make changes.
Empowerment, true empowerment. All right. I'm going to ask you guys a couple of quick questions here just to pull us to a close. What books are we reading right now?
From Dan Compton, it's the quickest read. It doesn't even really count as a book, but I just finished the Why Here, Why Now, which again, very quick read, but it comes back to a lot of these decision making. Again, written by a guy that runs for here in the Valley like an SAU team, and again, so it starts off the hook of the.
Hold on, this is supposed to be a rapid fire.
Okay, sorry. Yes, that.
Who's the author? Don't worry about it. We'll Google it.
Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy. It's excellent. It's in chunks because I'm like, okay, that one hits home a little bit. I got to meditate on that. It's great.
Nice.
I just reread the fire department customer service guide because it just got reprinted, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back and reread it. And I literally just finished reading that.
Days of Rage, Brian Burrow, because I meant to read the book you referred, and I ended up in Days of Rage, which I'm learning about the underground world and Homeland Defense. So
interesting. Yes. Nice. Final thoughts, takeaways.
Thank you. This was great.
No, that was fun. Yeah.
Integrity matters.
Boom. Hey, I appreciate you guys. 100th episode in the can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Strong work to you.
Yeah.
All right. Love you guys.
Let's do it in 100 more.
Hey, folks, that's all we have for today. I hope you enjoyed coming along as we celebrated the 100th episode of the Fireground Fitness Podcast. Looking forward, I've got so many more guests that are lining up to sit down and share wisdom and knowledge, and I hope you are willing to come along for the ride. If you're enjoying this podcast, get on over to Apple Podcasts, rate and review the podcast. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me at raingray@firegroundfitness.com. The lessons you've learned here today are for you to consider, to challenge, to push back on, to find ways to improve your life. That's the end goal here. Whether you believe what we've said here or not, if you have a different perspective, good. That's great. Let's go on out there and provide the best service in the community. Let's go on out there and provide best service in our families. Let's go on out there and become the best human beings that we can be as we travel through space together on this beautiful planet. Go on out there and get some.